I'm going to start by introducing our panel, and I'm going to go in alphabetical order so you can follow along in your programs. I'm going to start with Scott Barton. Scott Barton is the principal of the Preuss School, UCSD. It's an award-winning charter middle school that serves low-income, highly motivated students. He was a founding member of the faculty there and has served as the school's dean of students for 9 years before he became principal. The school has grown from 150 students to 800 during his tenure. And he's been an educator with the San Diego Public Schools for more than 30 years. So I trust Scott and his wisdom. He told me before we started the panel that he gets to go surfing every morning before school, and so it's a smart guy. Next, I'm going to introduce Erin Benham. She's a literacy teacher at Lincoln Middle School. She's taught secondary school students for 34 years in the Meriden, Connecticut public schools. She is also the president of the Meriden Federation of Teachers and a vice president with the Connecticut AFT. Through that work, she has been the coordinator of the ELT Innovation Fund grant that Meriden has gotten from the National AFT. Next, I'd like to introduce Anna Salzberg. Anna is an 8th grade teacher at E.L. Haynes Public Charter School here in DC, and she's also a Teach Plus teaching policy fellow. Anna began her teaching career in Thailand on a Fulbright fellowship and then moved back to her hometown of DC to begin a teaching career at the Cesar Chavez Public Charter School. She teaches 8th grade literacy, and she's also on the Learn Zillion Dream team, where she develops curriculum on Common Core. Next, I want to introduce Paul Toner. Paul is the president of the 110,000-member Massachusetts Teacher Association. He's a voice for educators across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Prior to that, Paul had served as the president of the Cambridge Teachers Association in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and from 1993 to 2001 was a 7th and 8th grade social studies teacher at the Harrington Elementary School in Cambridge. He's a graduate of Boston University, holds a master's degree from UMass Boston, and a law degree from Suffolk Law. And finally, RaStar West is a 4th grade teacher at the Morton School of Excellence in Chicago. She's an instructional leadership team member at her school, has taught for 10 years in the Chicago Public Schools, is a graduate of Eastern Illinois University, and has a master's degree from St. Xavier University. So I want to start the panel with a question for Paul Toner, and then we'll circle around and come back to Paul at the end. So Paul, as president of the MTA since 2010, you've played a major leadership role in expanding learning time in Massachusetts. You've seen the growth and development of this initiative over 9 years. Can you talk a little bit about the benefits and what you hear from teachers about the need for teacher collaboration time?
Sure. Well, first of all, when I was president in Cambridge, we negotiated to have 2 of our schools be ELT schools. And then I became MTA president, so I would go back often to the King and the Fletcher Maynard and some of the other schools in Massachusetts. And the first thing that usually came out of the mouths of social studies and science teachers were, we actually have time to teach our subjects again. Because of the heavy emphasis on literacy and math, a lot of the other subject area teachers, the art, the phys ed, et cetera, music, felt that they were being squeezed out. And just the additional time at those 2 schools and the other schools in Massachusetts, they've said we're able to actually have more time to meet as teachers, more time for enrichment activities, which is what usually is going on when the teachers are having more collaborative planning time. And in addition, the science and social studies teachers especially emphasize their ability to then have project-based learning opportunities with the kids. So it focused on the importance of the core academics, which we all should, but it also allowed the teachers to work more together across themes and projects and provide those engaging enrichment opportunities for the kids.
Great. Now I'd like us to hear a little bit from classroom teachers. RaStar, I want to start with you. Your school is featured in the Time for Teachers report because you have more time and to review data, to discuss instruction. Can you explain a little bit about how that works and how your instruction as well as that of your fellow teachers has improved over the course of this time?
with the extended time, we've done so many different things within our school. One of the major things that we have been working on recently is really shifting our thinking about teaching. We've started looking at it less of just being a teacher and more so about being learners. So we used a lot of our time to just transform our knowledge base as teachers. Some of the major things that we do is we host professional learning communities that are led by school instructional leaders and teacher leaders. We use the time to just really dig deep into our craft as teachers, learn more about the content that we're going to be teaching, and the pedagogy again. So it really transforms our whole thinking. We become more instructionally sound, and therefore we're able to deliver better lessons to the students, and just makes for us to work better together because we're all on one accord. So just that time gives us a real opportunity just to become learners again and increase our knowledge base, which has transformed the instruction throughout the whole entire school.
And it looks like over the past few years, you've really seen differences in student learning. And so can you talk about how this work with teacher collaboration fits into the larger turnaround effort at your school?
Outside of just being learners, we use the time to review data. So we learn, we focus ourselves on the instructional piece, and then we come back together and say, is this working, is it not working? What can we do as a community to make that better? So the time that we used, we review a lot of data, and I think just reviewing data and having an embedded time for a data review cycle has been able to drive our school into the direction of meeting the achievement goals and decreasing the achievement gap for our students.
Great, great. Anna, I want to turn to you next. At your current school, E.L. Haynes, there's also an expanded day. You've had some opportunities at the school for teacher leadership. Can you talk a little bit about what happens now in terms of teacher leadership and what you could see happening in the future?
Sure. So we are a public charter school based in DC that was founded about 10 years ago. We are not a CMO. We're 3 separate campuses in elementary, middle, and high school. And next year we'll be built out to our full capacity with 12th graders. So over the years, the opportunities for teacher leaderships have grown and transformed, and it's something that we're definitely continuing to work on. So currently, there are a number of different opportunities for teacher leadership, sort of in an official and also unofficial capacity. So officially, every Friday, we from 1 o'clock until 4 o'clock, we have something called Haynes University, or Haynes U, which is a program developed by our head of teacher development, where teachers are able to self-select a course of study. And all of these courses of study are either taught by teachers or by instructional coaches. So for example, there was a 3-day program at Columbia Teachers College about argument writing that I really, really wanted to go to. So I begged and begged and begged, and I was able to go under the stipulation that I was then going to come back and teach a Haynes U course on argument writing and debate. So I went to the course, I learned a lot, read some more, learned some more, and then came back and led a 4-course session on launching argument writing, debate, and a very specific debate protocol that teachers are now using across 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grades in both literacy and humanities. So we have the opportunities for teachers to teach other teachers. We also have grade level lead positions, mostly grade level lead positions organize, especially in 8th grade where there are a lot of activities, help to organize all of the activities that 8th graders participate in, which add to their experience in middle school. This is definitely something that we're continuing to work on. I think that some of the schools profiled in the report, and also other high-performing public charter schools that are CMOs specifically, meaning that they're expanding, constantly have new opportunities for teachers to go up a pretty clear growth ladder. So you might start as a teacher and become a grade level lead, and then an assistant principal or founding teacher at another school. I think at our school there are some limitations because we're not expanding. So there are inherently limited technical growth titles, if that makes sense. They are very intentional about hiring teachers to administrative positions that open. So our head of literacy, head of math, student support services, dean of culture, the list goes on. We're all former teachers at our school. But I think that's something that we're looking for and looking towards, and we'll definitely use the report to help guide us in, is figuring out how, in addition to having literacy coaches, how teachers can become mentors, or how teachers can help new teachers on board through more official capacities.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the obstacles to teacher collaboration and teacher leadership in your framework?
Sure. So we do meet as a literacy team weekly. The way that we're currently structured, I'm the only 8th grade lead literacy teacher. However, we teach with an inclusion model, so all of my classes are co-taught with an English language learning specialist and a special ed specialist. So we have a weekly meeting where we can look at our unit and look at our data, and we can figure out together the best path for differentiation going forward in the current unit and in units going forward. In addition to that, however, especially our highest need students are in a number of different support services. So many of them are in a program, Alexia program, so it's a computer-based program. Many of them are pulled out of humanities, and they also meet with a content specialist there. So I think what I feel most as a literacy teacher is that I would really like the time to also meet with the people who are pulling them out of class and to really look at the Lexia data. So even more time to be looking at data weekly. We have quarterly DAP days, so data analysis planning days, but even more time, I think, to talk across grade levels, to talk across content, to be able to dive deeply to see, in humanities, when you're really focusing on writing, how can I pull that into my literacy instruction here? Or the student's really struggling with this particular issue in phonics or decoding, how can I build that into my guided reading instruction?
That's helpful. Erin, I want to turn to you next. Your school and district received an AFT Innovation Fund grant for expanding learning time. Can you talk about how this emerged as a priority for you?
Well, basically, our district went as a team up to Boston when the National Center for Time and Learning was there. Was intrigued with the whole concept. We then had a very opportunity at that point to apply for the Innovation Fund through the AFT, and the two sort of just came together as the perfect match. So when we went to Boston at that time, the superintendent was part of our team as well as other administrators, and it was clear in our discussions, there was about 8 of us that went from our district, that some of our schools, 2 in particular, which are now expanded learning schools in our district, could do it and certainly needed it. You could ask any of our teachers anywhere, not just in our district, anywhere, what do they need more of, and every teacher's going to answer time. In both of these cases, our students needed more time, that their best time was when they were in schools and not at home. And that's sort of how we began our process, and now we've added another one for next year.
Nice. Can you talk about how teachers' jobs have changed and responsibilities have changed under the new grant?
Drastically in these particular schools. We expanded our time in our schools for our students to 8 hours, but not our teachers. This was an initiative that we really wanted to embrace, but also understood that our district could not afford to change anything in the teacher's contract. So it was we had to really look at our contract very carefully about what time was available in that contract, and we used a lot of that time. Our wraparound time, for example, in our contract was put in there maybe 25, 30 years ago when teachers, that was basically the time that teachers report to school, but not necessarily all that time in front of children. We had a good 45 minutes combined on both ends. So we used some of that time to get some PLC data time. We also recognized through our work with the National Center on Time and Learning how much wasted time, transition time, and so forth. So we took those 2 elements, extended our Children's Day, brought in many community partners to help us. And our teachers now are shifts in there, so we're more of a business model. We have a certain amount of teachers that arrive to school at one particular school at 7:15, but their day is over at 2. Our next set of teachers come in the typical school day, 9 to 3:30. So we do have a period of time, and all 3 schools are different. One of the things that was the nice thing and able to get from the AFT to get this grant was just to be able to, these schools were given the autonomy to write what their school needed. You know, looking at the data, what are your schools lacking? What do you need? And where do you want to put what you're doing with there? So it was definitely teacher-led in all 3 schools, and they were given the opportunity to plan their day. It was basically that they came up with exactly how they were going to structure their day, who was going to cover the time when the shifts were, when the whole building was not covered by teachers. So it was a very good opportunity for our teachers to expand their learning time, as well as our students, obviously, to get their enrichment. Our core was never, in fact, our core instruction was actually expanded in some of our schools because when you go through the re-engineering of a schedule, you certainly learn all the things that you've always done aren't always necessarily the best things to keep doing. And it was just simple things of transition that you can, you can really certainly gain a lot of time by just looking at that. Our teacher collaboration time doubled in all our schools, which was most important. Because they needed that time more so than ever with all these enrichment and community partners in our schools, looking at data, looking at children and what they needed, and in particular in each grade level where they could be used.
And how did the teachers interact with the community partners?
Very well. I mean, we started at one, Howie and Meriden put in, we had one school that went in. It was a different situation because of the innovation grant that our teachers actually covered the expanding time that first year. We learned very quickly that that's a long day for teachers to have. And it was not, and we knew it's for sustainability, we couldn't continue with that. So that first year, we had about 17 teachers that were stipend to cover that whole time. But during that time, we were bringing in community partners. We have learned from that school as we shifted to the 2 shifts, as well as we picked up the second school in our planning stage for our third to open up this fall, that our community partners are vital to be part of that data teaming, to be part of the PD. We learned that, some of the things that the shift for our teachers, they needed some PD, and we can see that through the data. Not only did we realize where our students' needs were, but we certainly saw our teachers. And by the second year, we noticed that we needed also that we couldn't use community partners and give them that same PD. So they really are part of the team. When we have PD, we try as much as we can. I mean, we utilize them to give the teachers their time, but we try to utilize them as well in the data team processing, even down to looking to attendance and helping out with those kind of things.
Great.
Is how we use them.
And talk about the benefits teachers have experienced.
Well, it's for most of the teachers, if you ask them, certainly at Pulaski and Berry, which are the 2 schools that do it now, is that they all, at Berry, they have the saying that they brought the fun back into teaching because, this was a time that if teachers, decided to spend the extra time with the whole extended day, they could teach to their passion. So we have teachers that, might be dance instructors and they're teaching dance and karate and woodworking and things like that that normally would never be able to be done in their regular day. They know all the students in the school. That was the biggest, probably the shift for most teachers. Elementary teachers are so used to their kids. They're 25. Our school now, it's all of their children. So it's all 600 or 700 of those children have become theirs because they see them with this extended time. So that was a huge shift for them as far as that goes. A little different, a little getting used to, and we're still, working with it with the split schools. We really actually have 2 schools inside of a school, and we have to put in some structures to put it back as one faculty. But, and that's some of the things that we're working on as far as that goes. Huge leadership opportunities for teachers. We now have extended day facilitators in our schools. We realized that from year 1, that we needed someone just to really look at this enrichment, organize this enrichment. It was not something our administrators could do on their own, so they needed that help in doing so. Our directors at each school that we put in through the grant, our district has now picked up as vice principals at each school. So we certainly have seen a shift as that goes, and just the leadership and data team that's there. Every level data team has their leader, and then a school-wide leader, a school-wide group that comes together. So certainly a different change for these 3 schools, and very unlike. All 3 schools are different. There are 8 elementary schools in Meriden. These 3 are all different from each other, and certainly different from the other 4.
Great, great. So I want to turn to Scott. Scott's a principal. Scott, talk a little bit about your vision for the school and how time for teacher collaboration fits into that vision.
Well, teacher collaboration has been key for us, and I'm so happy to be here today, seeing that we've been doing this for 15 years, and we expanded our school year by 20 days, and as part of that, we carved in a niche for teachers to work with. And you know, our vision from the beginning has been to prepare underrepresented minority students for college. And we think that, you heard what Roberto said, this is the key to what we need to be doing. And the longer learning time allows us to do that. The collaboration is such an important part of what we do. When our teachers have 105 minutes a week as a full group or breaking into groups, plus an additional 90 minutes a day that they can work with smaller groups. And you know, we needed a purpose to the collaboration, not just collaborate and lesson plan. And I noticed in the report there's a lot of reference to lesson planning. We used something, we all read a book, The Teaching Gap by Stiegler, and did lesson study, where one group of teachers get together, one teacher, they plan a lesson, one teacher teaches a lesson, they all observe it. Then they go back and refine it, reflect on it, and do this 4 or 5 times, and we found we had tremendous lessons from it. As important is we learned how to collaborate. We learned how to meet. Now we can meet in all different kinds of configurations anytime, and it's meaningful time. And we do professional development, and we do collaboration to improve student achievement. That's the bottom line for us. And we model collaboration. So at the Preuss School, students are collaborating as part of their learning, and how nicely that fits with our Common Core standards, with problem solving and inquiry-based learning. We need to model those things as teachers, so as teachers become more familiar how to do this themselves, then they're modeling it for their students, and it's had a tremendous benefit at our school, and our students, we feel well positioned for Common Core. I'm not sure I answered exactly your question, but that's what I wanted to share. This longer learning time is the key to everything that we do, and we've got to get more folks on board with it, our policymakers. Does it cost us a little bit more? Yes. But we think this is the minimum. This is what everybody needs to be doing to educate these urban youngsters. We need to have more resources put to longer learning time.
Can you talk about the process of building a successful collaborative culture among all teachers in the school?
Yeah, I think it starts, for us, it started out with the lesson study, where we work together to do this. As we bring new teachers in, we bring them on board with the same process. As a principal, it's my job to facilitate student success by facilitating teacher preparedness, and teachers are going to go to other teachers. So as we develop a strong professional development program, these teachers get better at what they do, the collaboration happens, and it naturally, and I can keep those teachers at the school also. Our teachers have been there an average of 6.5 years, and we're only 15 years old, so they want to stay. The professional development, I think that builds the collaboration as we go, and it's an ongoing thing. This is not a one-time thing where we do lesson study. We continue. You know, all the things that we do, they're all interrelated, and I think that's what dials those folks in and breeds the collaboration.
What advice would you have for other principals and school leaders who are thinking about expanding time, thinking about building in time for teacher collaboration? What can they expect as challenges in the process?
Well, first of all, do it. Find a way to do it, and it's our local elected officials, state, national, and you know, I think for us it was embraced by everybody. You know, the parents appreciated that the teachers were spending time learning and working together. Our teachers certainly appreciated the time. So I think the simple answer is find a way to do it. We've got to build in more time for teachers. We need more time for students, and that was the first report that they did. And then now we need more time for teachers to use that time.
That's helpful. Paul, on the advice tack, what advice would you have for policymakers and district leaders, union leaders around expanding schedules and specifically expanding time for school-embedded PD?
Sure. Well, I actually want to second the do it part of it. Every poll I've seen from NEA, AFT, my own state, MTA, Teach Plus, every organization that's done a poll on this issue says teachers want more time. And the issue, with things like Common Core and a variety of other things is they're not opposed to it. They just want more time to be able to do it well and to work together. So I'd really urge district leaders, union leaders, building leaders to begin with by sitting down and just simply saying, this is what we have now. What do we if we were to rebuild our school day, what would we do differently? And I know there's an NEA report that they did with Viva, or recommendations from Viva from some teachers around the country to NEA to really sit down and say, what do we really need to be successful for our students? And then build that model. And then worry about, so how are we going to pay for it? Is it flex time? Is it additional money for salaries? Is it community partners? But figure out what the kids really need. Is it a 6.5-hour day, a 7-hour day, an 8-hour day? Then work with the parents and the community, because I'll just say that at least in one community near and dear to my heart, they made a mistake. They said they were going to add an hour to the day for all schools in the district. And they never had a conversation with the parents. It was discussed in union negotiations, but nobody really talked about what were they going to do with that hour. I think they really have to start by sitting down and saying, if we all agree that this is how long a school day should be, which builds in enrichment, academics, and the time teachers need, then we should have that discussion. I know that sometimes there's pushback from parents because they have their own afternoon activities. But if there's a way for us to meet those needs and be flexible with those parents as well, I think that would be extremely helpful. So I really think people have to build the plan and then figure out how to fund it and pay for it.
So you mentioned the Viva project with the NEA and current teachers. Can you talk a little bit more about the recommendations that you heard from teachers in that and the synergies between what's in that and this current report?
Sure. I mean, I quite honestly read the Viva report on the plane down, and having read the recommendations in this report, they're almost identical. Different words, but pretty much the same thing. Career ladders, flexibility, engaging the community and collaborating with teachers. So I think there's a lot to work with here, and not only this report, but many other reports. It's really about sitting down with the teachers, and I'll use this opportunity to give a shout out to people in these quote-unquote underperforming schools, people who are trying to mandate changes to those schools. The thing they should be doing is starting with the teachers and the parents in that community and talking about what do we know we have to fix, because we all know we have to fix things in these schools, and letting them build the plan based on the community. Hold them accountable, but make sure that they're involved in the planning, rather than assuming the people in the school don't want to change. They do want to change. They need help in developing those plans. So they're not identical, but there's an awful lot of similarity and synergy between these two plans.
So helpful. So how do we move from here? What should we be doing in the policy world to focus these reforms, to focus resources like Title II dollars toward more teacher collaboration time? I
think districts and schools have to sit down and do a real assessment of how are they using their time now. I think several people have mentioned it, but I remember Professor Elmore from Harvard talking about it 10 years ago, saying before you add time to the school day, let's talk about what you're doing now. How much time is sucked up by picture day and field trips, and that unless they're doing something for the curriculum, but passing time in the hallways, things like that. Let's really assess what's going on now. Reconfigure that, and then if there's a need for more time, then add it. It's really about making sure that everybody's engaged in the conversation, and the same could be said on these conversations about, there's a big debate about, do we assess too much? Probably, but let's have a conversation about what assessments we're doing, what are actually helpful keep the ones that are helpful, get rid of the ones that aren't. You just freed up a whole bunch of time. Same can be said for bad professional development. Let's focus on the things that are good, that the teachers want and is successful, and get rid of the things that aren't so successful. So there are some time drags and wastes right now in the schedule. Let's really do our own audit in our schools and districts, figure out what we can free up, and then if we still need more time, which I presume we do, at least we've gotten rid of the clutter, because I think most teachers are saying, you keep adding to the plate, but you never take anything off. It's time to take stuff off the plate.
Fair enough, and that makes a good question for everyone on the panel. Are there any things that you all have done as your school has transitioned to being more thoughtful about the time you have and expanding it, to take things off the plate, to make better use of time by cutting down on certain things?
Well, in Meriden, just the nature of when we did the shift schedule, it eliminated half the teacher duty time. Because you can't do afternoon duty if you're no longer in the building and when the students are being dismissed. And that always seemed to be an issue, a contractual issue that people got wrapped in probably too heavy, that everyone had to be, equity and so forth. So you had all these teachers covering spots that maybe weren't necessary to cover. And I think, as you mentioned, when you start looking at what your school does, if you keep doing what you're always doing, you're just going to get the results that you're always getting. And when the two schools that we looked at certainly were schools that needed the improvement. So we really had to look at what are our teachers doing when they arrive. And then sometimes they were spending a lot of time getting kids off buses, putting kids back on buses, covering this. And that's when we realized that the time was off, that the teachers were there. We needed to utilize the experts in the building, because they know what's best. And it takes time to go through that, but it's, when we go through our expanded learning schools, I'd love to have all our schools be able to go through that, because I think it was certainly an eye-opener for my planning teams of teachers, that they just couldn't believe the amount of time that wasn't in there for direct instruction. And I think anyone who goes through the process is shocked when they see it.
And Celine, can I just jump back in?
Yeah.
The one thing when I hear objection to more time, teachers usually are telling me, not just teachers, but all staff in schools are telling me, they're not, they already put in usually 2 or 3 hours more at home or sitting at their desk in the classroom, but they have control over it. And that's what they want, is they don't want to be told it's going to be another hour or two of school, and then, forgive me, the principal tells me to come down to the auditorium for either useless PD or announcements. They want to know that the time is going to be used effectively and that they're going to have control over it.
Can those of you who are still in the classroom talk a little bit about the role of teacher leadership? So in some schools, there's kind of a PLC model that says everyone is an equal contributor. In some schools, there are formal roles for teachers. What do you think about those two different approaches, and how it's worked in your school?
At Morton, we follow both approaches. We have teachers who are in the classroom that are also in charge of things like grade level team meetings, data clusters, and PLCs. We love it. It gives everyone an opportunity to share, collaborate with one another, and it just gives you insight. Especially when I think about times that we get new teachers, we're able to embrace them, we're able to mentor them, and we're able to work with them and guide them in the direction the school is going. So at Morton, it just works really well. We use it for everything. We have an ILT where teachers meet with the administrator directly. Then from there, the ILT members disperse information to the teams that they oversee, so everyone knows exactly what's going on, how things are going to go, what the vision and mission of the school is, and how we're going to get that done.
We do have many similar practices. Something I think that our school does very well is there is truly a culture of trust and respect and collaboration across the staff. That is fostered by the administration. So, for example, this year we realized that in terms of sort of student behavior and our systems around student behavior, we had kind of plateaued, and we needed to strengthen and beefen up our systems for next year. teachers came together and we decided we wanted to start a teacher culture cohort. So it's a volunteer basis, but the administration has dedicated an hour of a professional learning time on Friday afternoons for an optional meeting where we are coming together. I facilitate the meetings. I develop the scope and sequence under the sort of guidance and tutelage of our principal, and we're coming together to essentially redesign our culture system. So while that's not an official responsibility or an official duty, our administrators have really gone above and beyond in order to make the time for that, to support that, and to really encourage teachers to engage in that. And it's been really successful. We have 15 to 20 teachers coming every week. And then going forward to next year, the teachers will be involved in the planning process for the summer in terms of launching our new behavior systems. And then we'll meet weekly with administrators next year in order to ensure that those systems continue.
Okay. And what's the role of teacher expertise? So I know that you have a role in data analysis. I imagine there are other pieces of professional learning, like you talked about, you're taking a course in argument and bringing it back. What's the role of expertise in this, and teachers developing kind of specialized expertise and bringing it back to the team?
Well, at Morton, everyone, well, unless of course you are a new teacher, is considered an expert in something at our school. Our principal is fantastic at noticing where people's strengths are and allowing them to develop themselves with her guidance in that area. A lot of teachers have multiple roles. They're just good at a lot of different things, but those who are still working are completely supported by other teachers. If you say that you are interested in becoming an expert in something, the people within our building are going to help you get there, right? So everyone does something, everyone shares something. Just most recently, I attended the conference for math, and I took another new developing teacher with me. My principal completely encouraged me to bring someone who was newer so that we can guide them in a leadership role. They can be a part of the team, and they can start working on developing themselves as a developer of other teachers. Just really having a continuous cycle of growth at our school has impacted the teachers and the students, and it just makes for everything to be so much more collaborative.
Scott, do you have anything to say about the role of teacher leaders in collaborative settings?
Our professional development is created by our teachers. It's not created by the principal. We have a teacher that's a staff developer. We certainly encourage teachers. There's only one principal. We're a small school, and one vice principal, and I'm not leaving anytime soon, so that leadership is not going to be with the school. But it is an opportunity for teachers, as they said, to share their expertise, to go off to conferences. We don't bring a lot of stuff into our school. It's learning with and from one another. They might read some things and bring it in. It's teachers presenting on Common Core, how the math department is using Common Core, how we're implementing it, and they're sharing that with the other teachers. And so it really is a staff development and that collaboration then brings leaders up, and they want to be the ones up presenting and sharing, and they become expertise as we collaborate. So there's, I think, a huge opportunity with more time, more teacher collaboration for leaders, teacher leaders to emerge.
Great, that's helpful. So I have time for one last question, and I'm going to focus this one on Paul and Erin. So what's the role of unions in advancing time for teacher collaboration?
To be involved right from the start, to be at the table, every discussion. I think that's most important. The planning piece is, in our district, we did it very much as a united front. When we started speaking of it, the superintendent and I addressed the staff always together. We still do now. It's sort of a commonplace that we'll do that. But in particular at the schools that we were thinking of going, well before our plan was in place or gathering a planning team, we really went in and spoke with them, and a united front is really most important. and then handing it over to the school and they know their children best. They know what they need. In all three of our schools, Pulaski, for example, wanted background information. Their children were lacking that. And so that was their sole thing to look at when they were doing their enrichment. The other two schools that followed, one was reading, one was math. And allowing the teachers to come up with that, really use them as the experts. In our district, all our teachers sit on a instructional data team. And then those leaders in those sit on the school-wide instructional data team, and then those leaders sit on the district-wide. So there's a good communication base in our district, and that's vital because something could really fail if another school is getting nervous about what's going on over there. So I think it's really important that communication is there, and our best experts are our teachers,
I think the national, state, and local leaders need to be proactive in leading the discussion and providing the space and opportunity for people to have these conversations. Why wait until somebody else comes and presents you with the fait accompli of this is the plan? We should be proposing the plans ourselves and making sure that our members have heavy investment and voice in that process. Especially, in Massachusetts, we're #1 in the nation, but we all know that our middle-class suburbs are what's driving that, and then we have our urban areas that are, doing better than most places in the nation. However, there's a gap, and those are the schools we should be focused on because those kids aren't getting the same opportunities as many other middle-class suburbs.
Fair enough. Okay, so we're going to open this up to questions from the audience right now. I do want to let you know that Jennifer and Claire are also available to answer questions about the report itself, and so we'll open it up. There's a microphone over there, and so if folks could line up, that's ideal.
Hi, good morning. Justin Stone, AFT Innovation Fund. I just wanted to say thank you to NCTL and Teach Plus for hosting this event. We've been on this journey with Erin Benham for a couple years now, and we've learned a lot about the opportunities that teachers can have and can create for themselves when they're given this time and the resources to do it. But we've also learned about some of the bottlenecks along the way, and some of those bottlenecks can involve things like logistics. I'd like to hear some folks talk about on the panel, Erin, certainly you as well as Paul and other folks, talk a little bit more about what districts can be doing to support expanded time so it isn't just sort of a niche for a couple of schools, but can be offered to all the schools. And one of the things we've learned about in Meriden is the busing schedule in particular, and that buses, it's a big piece of a school budget, and it's a challenging nut to crack. So I think there needs to be a broader conversation involving CFOs, district staff, certainly the state. But Erin, maybe you can allude a little bit more to that, the resource piece.
Certainly, it's our biggest joke that all my expanded learning planning teams, they know the buses like no one can, and they certainly understand the budgets going behind and how buses really run a school system. We've been very creative, doubling up on buses, using our high school buses to help with the expanded learning. And I think districts have to look at that. There are some discussions even a little broader now about maybe looking at your surrounding districts. Can you share busing with with another district? All districts sort of have that idle time when the buses aren't moving, and we had to figure that out. And we had to just figure out exactly, where was that hour of time that they were just waiting to pick up the next school, and that's sort of how we planned. So it was a very innovative type of planning, but very intrinsic of how to get into the busing. Our community partners have helped us, I think, too, getting the word out. When you bring in the Y and the Boys and Girls Club and those people and the talk to the council, there was a lot of publicity around Meriden, Connecticut, with the governor and the commissioner always being there. That was very helpful to spark the community, saying, all right, what can we do to help? Our funding comes through our city council, so having those community partners was also vital. The more that talk, who's better than community partners and parents, and we engaging those parents as well. That's, sometimes in the lower poverty schools, the engagement of the parents is the problem. you expand the time, and it's amazing. They come. You know, our biggest thing was that when we first said it, you're never going to kids coming at 7:30 in the morning. Well, at that school, we have never seen below 96% attendance rate any day since we put in the expanded day. We were shocked by it, but we certainly didn't have a problem with people coming. So it's, you know, parents, community partners, and knowing the budget. If anything, I have about 40 of my teachers that know Meriden City's budget very well. So that's an education in itself.
I mean, one other logistical issue is sports. I know that Jennifer's been trying to get high schools to experiment with this, and I mean, I think I actually have a solution. The kids who play sports, fine, you come to school early and go play your sports. And my 15-year-old daughter, who does play sports, you know, she can go to school early. But the kids who would actually benefit from the added sleep come in on a flex schedule and come in at 8:30, 9 o'clock, and stay an hour later. I think my hometown has 4x4 block scheduling. I've suggested, why don't you add a fifth block? And the kids who play sports go blocks 1 through 4, and the kids who don't play sports can go blocks 2 through 5. And then we address this issue that keeps being pointed out by pediatricians, that teenagers need more sleep. And maybe that would actually help them be more successful. So, I mean, that's one suggestion. The other one is the one I referred to, where we've had opposition from parents who, my kid already has violin lesson or hockey practice or whatever, I don't want them in school longer. Well, I think we have to come up with flexible models so that during that time of day, the kids who need the enrichment in school can get it, and we could still have our extended day model for the ones that need it.
Great. Next question.
Mike DeMarco from Higher Achievement again. Both RaStar and Anna mentioned having more time to look at data, and I was wondering if you could just talk about what having that more time has allowed you to, if that's allowed you to look at different data, if it's allowed you to look more deeply at data, just how it's transformed it, and if there's still data that you wish you could have to look at with this more time.
So, as you know, teachers get tons of data all the time. So I get data by looking over a student's shoulder and seeing how much they're mastering the lesson that I'm teaching them, all the way up to their quarterly assessments given by ANET, the Achievement Network, and then of course their DC CAS tests and where they're placing there. I think we do a really good job of spending whole days looking at things like the ANET test, which is an interim assessment, and it's a standardized interim assessment. And then we'll spend our weekly meetings looking at smaller assessments, so exit tickets, or just discussing what we're noticing, how are kids performing on reading tests, those sorts of things. I think what would be helpful would be to be able to look at data across classrooms or even across grades to see in our curriculum where are gaps, where are my kids getting stuck. I have a very, very big range of readers, so I have students in a room reading from 4th grade reading level to a 9th grade reading level. So even the opportunity to look at what 5th or 6th grade's doing and to take a look at their data and see how it's reflecting in my students would be really helpful.
I think we all need more time to look
Right.
at data.
Absolutely.
Everybody up here, we, you know, business, and I think they have folks that look at the data for them and say, "Here's your data," and now, you know, make sense of it. But we teachers do it we do it ourselves, and so I think we all need a lot more time.
Mm-hmm. And I think part of that is, if we're talking about logistics, part of that is scheduling. So part of that is we have a sort of a staggered schedule, so sometimes it's challenging to meet with a reading specialist who's also teaching 5th, 6th, and 7th graders as well. So I think part of that is continuing to look at our scheduling, not just for providing teachers more time, but as they talked about in the report, providing teachers with more structured time and more time to be able to collaborate with people that perhaps we wouldn't think at first that they would need to collaborate with. I think you'd find out what teachers want, as we know, by just talking to teachers.
Mm-hmm. At Morton, we look at data weekly, monthly, every 3 months when we take our like NWEA. Mainly we do what you said. We do more of a deep dive on data, but it's different from math and the reading, the literacy teams. So reading looks at it more often because they also do like DIBELS and the benchmark assessment system, so they're able to monitor progress. Particularly as a math team, we do more of like weekly assessment data evaluations where we're able to form small groups and therefore differentiate our instruction on a weekly basis. Then when we look at like NWEA, we look school-wide, of course, for school-wide trends across the school like you would like to do. But then also in our meetings, we use different protocols so that we can actually zero in on what classroom teachers can do to improve their student data. So if you triangulate it, you look at kids who have this trend in this subject area, how can we as a team problem solve that, and then maybe plan some things out so that you can really impact the student achievement in that classroom. So it's more of a deep dive for us more regularly, but then large scale, depending on what type of data we're looking at, we do that on a regular basis all the time. And we even look at data when we talk about student attendance. Like everything starts with a number at Morton, which I think is really good because that makes it more tangible. Okay, so we have this many students, they're doing this, they're doing that. How can we make the shift to these students doing that?
I think we have time for one more question.
Hi, I'm Ava Millstone from TNTP. Ms. West mentioned an opportunity that you provided to one of your new teachers to accompany you to a professional development. I'm curious to hear from any of you if there are specific development opportunities that you've offered to new teachers within this flexible time model that have really helped them improve in their specific development areas, because we know first-year teachers are working on a lot of things.
Well, in Meriden, adding another school, being now second year and adding another school and now going into the next, what we've learned is to use those teachers. So we have peer coaching in our district, but I would say those three expanded learning now will become almost their own entity. Not that they can't go elsewhere, but we have what we call Meriden Teachers Sharing Success. Not only do we track data for our kids, our teachers are also tracked. And so we have like a group of about 25 teachers in our district that regardless of what models we were looking at, what testings, our test, the state test, the district test, they have always shown growth in everything they've done. And so those 25 teachers are the ones that we'll utilize. And at any time, any teacher can go and spend a day with them. The only requirement is that they spend a day, not just checking in for an hour, spending a whole day. And we encourage our newest teachers to do that. And we had a lot of it at our second school at John Berry, where they were having some classroom management, with just the longer day, when children are in, you sort of have to structure your end of your day a little bit different when you're getting to the last hour of an 8-hour day for, a 6-year-old. So those types of things that we utilized, and we'll utilize our whole district, and we have a set sort of teachers to do that. And we encourage them, and the district encourages them to do it.
I also think individual coaching, I know for me as a first-year teacher, was incredibly powerful. I'd be really stuck with a kid, wasn't sure what to do. Mm-hmm. My coach would observe me and either give me real-time feedback, and then we would debrief it, or sometimes if I was really stuck, I would say, really trying to get Jasmine to show and not tell in her writing, can you please conference with her? And I would just watch. And I still use many of the strategies that I learned there. And it's another suggestion they have in the report, but I do think that in addition to the peer coaching, that individualized observation, check-in and feedback, and then that feedback loop for first-year new teachers is extremely helpful and powerful.
I also think that not only within my school, but also within our network, we try to put experienced teachers with new teachers so that they can be submerged into what they're going to experience and then have someone to be there for them. So the teacher that I brought with me, I've known her since she was a first-year teacher at my school. We've worked together since the very beginning. When she had math questions as her first year, she talked to me, she talked to another teacher. She was completely submerged within her content area and as a learner. So I think when you put those strong systems in place where you have the new teacher who's working with an experienced teacher and then you guys form a relationship, and then you go off and you do things, you come back together. Not only are we going to work together to get the information, but of course when we start thinking about development for next year, that's going to be another way that we use our time to collaborate on how now not only me, but you as a new teacher can go forth and develop other teachers within the building. So you become an expert now. I think that's awesome, fundamental for learners.
I think that's great. So I want to thank all of the panelists and thank you all in the audience for great questions.
Thank you so much again, panelists and Celine, for the wonderful discussion. I want to have a call to action that just says, just do it, as our two panelists suggested. But to just do it, we need all of your help. And we hope that you are going to join us to implement the policy and practice recommendations called for in this report. We need the administration, Congress, state leaders to continue to support funding and policies that enable more schools to expand time for both students and teachers. We need district leaders to direct resources and support schools to create school-embedded professional learning opportunities, and to put in place the infrastructure and staffing models that can support students while teachers are learning together. We need new human resource models in districts that support teachers to move into instructional leadership roles and more opportunities for teachers to share best practices. All of this is attainable, but we will have to create new, broad-based coalitions to move the agenda forward and to change the hearts and minds of many district leaders and educators who have the old view of what professional development for teachers means. We must remember that education reform that works happens with teachers, not to teachers. As you have heard today, expanded learning time schools provide opportunities for effective reform that have been teacher and union supported and led. We also have to work with parents, as you've heard today, to help them better understand the importance of teachers spending time together outside of the classroom, and to help address parents' anxiety about their children missing valuable learning time when teachers are together. We need to create these new models of staffing and schooling that enable community partners, extra teachers, expert artists, blended learning models, classes taking place in science museums and other institutions, and more, because a part of an expanded schedule and school day, one that closes both achievement and opportunity gaps, we have to be creative around how to enable those opportunities for both students and teachers. I want to close by saying one of the questions about district logistics. I remember well some of the early years working with Paul and others in Massachusetts around that. And you have to bring district leaders in early as well to these conversations so that they can be a part of how do we address the transportation, how do we ensure every child has a snack in the afternoon, and how do we dedicate the resources necessary to provide these embedded opportunities in an expanded day. I also want to say that we have tools on our website, timeandlearning.org, that help with some of the issues that came up throughout this conversation. Not only reports like this today and best practices, but also we have time audit tools that enable schools to really analyze how they are currently using time and use that as a discussion to expand and change and strengthen teaching and learning at their schools. So, thank you so much for your time today, for joining us, and we look forward to continuing this discussion and implementing the recommendations. Take care.